When you think of banks, you think of them as pretty smart financial institutions. I mean, they've got the resources, the analysts, they can really know some things that we don't know. Since the 1980s, banks have been buying life insurance. It's called BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. And they've not just bought a little bit of this, but they bought a lot. As a matter of fact, banks are the #1 purchasers of whole life insurance in the world. And it makes me really think. Banks are so smart when it comes to money. They have all the analysts, they have all the research, they have all the money to spend to find the best place that they can put their money, and specifically their most valuable money, Tier 1 capital. Where do banks put their most prized, valuable money? Life insurance. The one place that your banker would tell you not to put your money. I always find that funny how banks put their money one place, but then tell us to put our money in a completely different place. Makes you kind of think, doesn't it? Well, that's what I want to talk about. But before we get into the banker's secret, I'd like to reveal another secret to you. This is a really good one, so pay attention. You see that little thing right there? Yes, it says subscribe. Within that little button holds some of the biggest secrets ever known to mankind when it comes to money. So all you gotta do is click that little subscribe button, and also the little bell. What you're gonna wanna do is smash that bell so that every time a new video goes out about a secret when it comes to money, you'll be notified. Now, I just watched the Bills game last night, so I'm gonna repeat Josh Allen's famous end zone throw. Interception, darn it. Anyway, let's get into this secret. So it's funny because most of our life, when we think about whole life insurance, which is the closest thing to BOLI, bank-owned life insurance, we think of it as a terrible place to put our money. But when you really dive into it and you look up banks and you look up BOLI, you start to understand, well, it's really not such a bad place because it's incredibly attractive to banks for many reasons. And I've got a list here of these reasons. So what makes BOLI attractive to banks? Well, I've actually got the answer for that, and I'm going to read this right out of an excerpt that we found on fdic.gov. Check this out. According to the FDIC website, banks are the largest purchasers of cash value life insurance in the United States. Shut the front door. Man, these buggers are buying a lot of that stuff, but it gets even better. Life insurance, they buy it as a stable asset. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it's a safe asset. During the Great Recession, BOLI outperformed both stocks and safe assets that banks sell to their customers. This one's a good one. In other words, banks are selling you safe assets, but they're not putting their money where you're being told to put your money. They're putting their money into life insurance, and they're doing it without risks of fractional banking or market volatility. Pay attention. Let's go on one more thing that we found in FDIC's little footnotes here. What is the purpose of BOLI? BOLI is life insurance purchased by banks on their executives and key employees. Hold on, stop right there. Executives and key employees. This should make you kind of wonder a little bit because when you go into a bank and you look around, don't you see a lot of vice presidents? Have you ever thought to yourself, boy, it sure is strange that every bank I've ever been into has a whole bunch of vice presidents. It seems like there's a vice president of everything. Vice president of janitorial, vice president of tellers, vice president of lending, vice president of this and that. But what is a vice president? It's an executive. So when you work for a bank and you're promoted to a VP position, that makes you an executive of the bank, which means it gives the bank an insurable interest in your life. Because as an executive, if you were to pass away, the bank could suffer a financial loss by losing one of its executives. So when you get into what is the purpose of BOLI, bank-owned life insurance, it says, BOLI is a life insurance purchased by the banks on their executives and key employees. It is primarily used to offset the cost of employee benefits, such as healthcare, 401k programs, and vacation days. But it goes on to say this, what are the benefits of life insurance for banks? I think this is brilliant. Bank products have low rates and are taxable, while life insurance offers guaranteed growth, tax advantages, and the opportunity to shore up balance sheets with an asset that is so reliable it can be used as collateral. And it talks about the tax advantages and the returns. And it says BOLI policies produce far superior returns than traditional bank investments. And the growth in the cash value of these policies, as well as the death benefits paid out, are completely tax-free. Wow, not so shabby, huh? But wait, there's more. See, they go on to talk a lot about safety and security of life insurance. So it goes on to say that since these policies are considered somewhat liquid due to their cash surrender value, they can be counted as Tier 1 capital under new capital requirement rules, which is the 10% that banks must hold for all the money that we deposit there. Yeah, you've heard of fractional reserve banking. This is their safe money. And the financial double standard, as they call it, is they say banks don't follow conventional wisdom and put their cash into mutual funds, stocks, hedge funds, or term life insurance, or risky real estate deals. Instead, they place a large portion of their vital reserves, known as their Tier 1 capital, into high cash value life insurance or permanent insurance. Hence, whole life insurance. They just don't call it whole life because they call it bank-owned life insurance. But, you know, when you think about this, banks aren't the only ones doing this. Yeah, credit unions are also doing this. Companies throughout the entire S&P 500, the 500 S&P companies, many of those companies are using this, but yet it's called COLI, company-owned life insurance. And when you think about specifically the bank-owned stuff, we must look at this one thing, because this is where it's different than what you and I can do with whole life. You see, we can't build a BOLI policy. A lot of people will come to me and they'll say, hey Chris, I want a BOLI policy. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do a BOLI policy for you because you're not a bank. But we can specially design and engineer a whole life policy that will look like a BOLI policy. But right here is what makes it different. You see, bank-owned policies are single premium policies, which makes them a MEC, a modified endowment contract, which for you and I, if we have a MEC, that would mean that it's taxable. And it goes on to say a modified endowment contract, which means that withdrawals or policy loans from the MEC to policy can trigger tax consequences or even penalties. Now, for the banks, it's a little bit different. That's why we, as individuals, can't do the same thing as a bank does. But it just really makes you think, right? Banks are putting their money in a place that they're not telling you to put your money in. Why? Well, that's probably because it's not profitable. I mean, what else would make any sense, right? If a bank told you to put your money in a specially designed and engineered whole life, which they never will, go in and ask them. Go ask your banker. Go in and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Banker, I want to put my money the same place the bank puts its Tier 1 capital. Yeah. Can you help me do that? They can't. And they won't. But they certainly will try to sell you some of those CDs or those mutual funds, or they'll put you in those ETFs, or maybe the stocks, or maybe an annuity. Gosh, banks love to sell annuities. Wonder why. Could it be commissions? Could the reason they're putting you in the stocks, bonds, mutual funds, could that be because they want fees? See, when you think of banks, banks love fees and they love commissions. So, in order for a bank or your banker to put your money the same place the bank does, it would result in them creating a whole life policy for you the same way we design them, and that would result in between a 60 and 90%, hold on, cut in their commissions. They don't want to do that, so that's why they don't. But let me give you some numbers, because this should really wake you up. You see, when you go to usbanklocations.com/bank, actually, just right here down below, that's the website where I went to find this. What you'll find is you'll find a list of all the banks in this country. But I just got the top 10. And I got the top 10 banks. And if we just do the top 5, it amounts to $74+ billion that the top 5 banks in this country have in BOLI. When we look at the top 10, it's almost $100 billion, and this is a little bit dated. So the conclusion really to this whole thing is, why are banks putting their money in a different place than they're telling you to put your money? And why are so many people out there saying that whole life insurance is a terrible place to put your money? Well, notice I said, why are they telling you that whole life insurance is a terrible place to put your money? Maybe it's because they're not telling you how to specially design and engineer your whole life policy that it mimics that which a bank would buy, called bully. Folks, this has always caught me, as a surprise, because banks are really smart. They're really smart when it comes to money. But you see, they're so smart that what they figured out is they can park their safe money, have it count toward their tier 1 assets and their regulatory requirements. But not only that, they get access to use that money. They can leverage that money. Oh, banks love to leverage things, but they can use that money. And they use it to offset those employee benefits, like I said earlier. So let me just give you a little bit of a role play. You work for a bank and you're getting ready to get promoted. You're really excited about it. You're going to be promoted to VP of coffee making. I'm just making this up, but let's just say that's going to be your new role. You're going to be the vice president of coffee making, so that when your customers come into your branch, they're not drinking that nasty, overly burned up black sludge. They're going to get themselves a fresh cup of joe. So this new position gives you a small increase in pay, but not only that, they also are going to give you a deferred compensation plan, which basically says that if you spend the next 20 years working for this bank, making that amazing cup of joe, we are going to give you a compensation package called the deferred comp. We're going to pay you an income for the rest of your life. And all you need to do is give us 20 years of your life. But on top of that, while you're here at the bank, if you should ever pass away or get hit by a bus, we're going to make sure that your family gets a fully paid up life insurance policy. Yeah, fully paid up. You don't have to pay a penny for it. That's what the vice president gets, and various other things. Now, what does the bank do? The bank takes their tier 1 assets, the money that we deposit in the bank. They go out and buy a single premium life insurance policy, bully, on that vice president of coffee making. How much do you think that policy's death benefit is? Is it the $100,000 they gave to that vice president, or maybe $250,000 that they promised him? Far from it. You see, that's the equitable benefit that the employee gets. The policy is probably several million, maybe even tens of millions of dollars. And it's all dependent on what that vice president's compensation package is. Now, that employee doesn't need to go through a medical. These are all guaranteed issue policies, which also is very different than the policies that we as individuals are going to buy, and very different than the ones that we would design for you, because you're going to have to go through a medical. You're going to have to prove that you are insurable. But for a bank, it's guaranteed issue, and the employee only has to be given a small amount. And there's different strategies that you can use for this in your own business. Remember, I said you can do it as a company-owned life insurance. There's things called key man, where you can go through and find your key employees, the ones that your company would really suffer from a loss of that person if that person were to pass away. That gives you an insurable interest in that key employee. Therefore, you could take out a policy on them. You'd have to give them something, maybe a fully paid up death benefit, but you can own that policy as the company owner. And you can also be the beneficiary of that policy. So should that employee ever pass away, yes, their family gets a death benefit, which was paid for by the company, but the company gets a really big payout in the form of a tax-free death benefit. And all the while money was being put into this policy, the company, you, would have access to use that money. That's one example as a key man. There's also another strategy, which is a little more complex, called split dollar. You can look up split dollar in Google and see what it is, but it's called a split dollar arrangement. A lot of times this is what a bank does, where they split the death benefit out. A little bit goes to the employee, the rest goes to the bank or the company. So these are just two of the many different executive strategies there are out there that all use, you guessed it, whole life insurance. But yet, you, for the majority of your life, have probably been told that whole life is a terrible place to put your money. I sometimes really got to lean back on Mr. Will Rogers and what he said. He said, the biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. He went on to say that the biggest problem is what people think that they know that just ain't so. Be careful what you believe. Go into the resources and start looking up what banks, the wisest of the wise when it comes to money, are doing with their money, and you will be quite surprised. So hey, if you want to know how to design one of these policies that mimics how the bank's BOLI policies are designed, check this video out right here. How to design an IBC policy, and this is the updated one. It'll give you the behind the scenes look. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on the next one.